Howdy, folks. Um, if you've been watching the WDW Pro channel, you might know that we had a video up yesterday that was, well, I guess it actually went up today, but we recorded it yesterday, going over some things that had been leaked to us from sources regarding what's been going on at Lucasfilm and Disney, and specifically The Mandalorian Season 3 and all the behind the scenes drama there. If you watch the video, you'll know that I got quite angry during it and have been feeling that way pretty much the whole day. So I thought it would be a good idea to jump into here and read the next chapter and hopefully do something a little bit more enjoyable, maybe a little bit happier. I hope you guys like it, and we'll jump straight in. For a long minute, Grand Admiral Thrawn sat in his chair, surrounded by his holographic works of art, and said nothing. Elian kept himself at a motionless attention, watching the other's expressionless face and glowing red eyes, and trying not to think about the fate couriers of bad news had often suffered at the hands of Lord Vader. All died but the Coordinator, then? Thrawn asked at last. Yes, sir, Pelion confirmed. He glanced across the room to where Sabaoth stood studying one of the wall displays and lowered his voice a bit. We're still not entirely sure what went wrong. Instruct Central to give the Coordinator a thorough debriefing, Thrawn said. What report from Wayland? Hellion had thought they'd been talking too quietly for Sabaoth to hear them. He was wrong. Is that it, then? Sabaoth demanded, turning away from the display and striding over to tower over Thrawn's command chair. Your Nogri have failed. So too bad, and on to more pressing business. You promised me Jedi, Grand Admiral Thrawn. Thrawn gazed coolly up at him. I promised you Jedi, he acknowledged, and I will deliver them. Deliberately, he turned back to Pelion. What report from Wayland? He repeated. Pelion swallowed, trying hard to remember that with Ysalamiri scattered all through the command room, Sabaoth had no power whatsoever. At least for the moment. The engineering team has finished its analysis, sir, he told Thrawn. They report that the cloaking shield schematics seem complete, but that to actually build one will take some time. It'll also be highly expensive, at least for a ship the size of the Chimera. Fortunately, they won't have to start with anything nearly this big, Thrawn said, handing Pelion a data card. Here are the specs for what we'll need at Sluis Van. The shipyards? Pelion frowned, taking the data card. The Grand Admiral had so far been very secretive about both his goals and the strategy for that attack. Yes. Oh, and we're also going to need some advanced mining machines. Mole miners, I believe they're informally called. Have intelligence start a record search. We'll need a minimum of 40. Yes, sir. Pelion made a note on his datapad. One other thing, sir. He threw a quick glance at Sabaoth. The engineers also report that nearly 80% of the Sparty cylinders we'll need are functional or can be restored to working order with relative ease. Sparty cylinders? Sabaoth frowned. What are those? Just that other little bit of technology I was hoping to find in the mountain, Thrawn soothed him, throwing a quick warning look in Pelion's direction. An unnecessary precaution. Hellion had already decided that discussing Sparty cylinders with Sabaoth would not be a smart thing to do. So, 80%. That's excellent, Captain. Excellent. A gleam came into those glowing eyes. How very thoughtful of the Emperor to have left such fine equipment for us to rebuild his empire with. What about the mountain's power and defense systems? Also operational for the most part, Pelion said. 3 of the 4 reactors have already been brought online. Some of the more esoteric defenses seem to have decayed, but what's left should defend the storehouse more than adequately. Again, excellent, Thrawn nodded. The brief flicker of emotion was gone, and he was all cool business again. Instruct them to begin bringing the cylinders to full operational status. The Death's Head should arrive within 2 or 3 days with the extra specialists and 200 Salamiri they'll need to get things started. At that point, he smiled faintly, we'll be ready to begin the operation in earnest, beginning with the Sluis Van's shipyards. Yes, sir. Hellion glanced at Sabaoth again. And about Skywalker and his sister. We'll use Team 4 next, the Grand Admiral said. Transmit a message telling them to withdraw from their current assignment and stand ready for further orders. You want me to transmit the message, sir? Hellion asked. Not that I'm questioning the order, he added hastily, but in the past you've usually preferred to contact them yourself. Thrawn's eyebrows lifted slightly. Team 8 failed me, he said softly. Sending the message through you will let the others know how displeased I am. And when Team 4 also fails you, Sabaoth put in. They will, you know. Will you be merely displeased with them too? Or will you admit your professional killing machines simply can't handle a Jedi? They've never yet met any foe they can't handle, Master Sabaoth, Thrawn said coolly. One group or another will succeed. Until then, he shrugged. A few Nogri, more or less, won't seriously drain our resources. Hellion winced, throwing a reflexive glance at the chamber door. Rook, he suspected, wouldn't be nearly that phlegmatic about the casually proposed deaths of some of his people. On the other hand, Admiral, this attempt will put them on their guard, he pointed out. He's right, Sabaoth said, jabbing a finger in Pellion's direction. You can't fool the Jedi twice with the same trick. Perhaps, Thrawn said, the word polite, but his tone not conceding anything. What alternative do you suggest? That we concentrate on his sister and leave him alone? That you concentrate on his sister, yes, Sabaoth agreed loftily. I think it best that I deal with the young Jedi myself. Again the eyebrows went up. And how would you propose to do that? Sabaoth smiled. He is a Jedi. I am a Jedi. If I call, he will come to me. For a long moment, Thrawn looked up at him. I need you with my fleet, he said at last. Preparations for the assault on the Rebellion's Sluis Van space dock facilities have already begun. Some of the preliminaries to that assault will require a Jedi Master's coordination. Sabaoth drew himself up to his full height. My assistance was promised only upon your promise to deliver my Jedi to me. I will have them, Grand Admiral Thrawn. Thrawn's glowing eyes bored into Sabaoth's. Does a Jedi Master go back on his word, then? You knew that obtaining Skywalker for you might take some time. All the more reason for me to begin now, Sabaoth shot back. Why can't we do both? Pelion cut in. Both looked at him. Explain, Captain, Thrawn ordered, a hint of threat audible in his tone. Pelion gritted his teeth, but it was too late to back out now. We could begin by starting rumors of your presence somewhere, Master Sabaoth, he said. Some sparsely populated world where you might have lived for years without anyone really noticing. Rumors of that sort would be certain to make their way back to the rebellion, he corrected, glancing at Thrawn, particularly with the name Yoris Sabaoth attached to them. Sabaoth snorted. And you think that on the strength of an idle rumor he'll rush foolishly to find me? Let him be as cautious as he likes, Thrawn said thoughtfully, the threat gone from his voice. Let him bring half the rebellion's forces with him if he chooses. There will be nothing there to connect you to us. Pelion nodded. And while we find a suitable planet and start the rumors into motion, you can remain here to assist with the Sluis Van preliminaries. Hopefully their response to our activities will keep Skywalker too busy to check out the stories until after the Sluis Van part is over. And if not, Thrawn added, we'll know when he makes his move, and in plenty of time to get you there ahead of him. Sabaoth murmured, stroking his long beard, his gaze drifting off to infinity. Pelion held his breath, and after a minute the other abruptly nodded. Very well, he said. The plan is sound. I will go to my chambers now, Grand Admiral Thrawn, and choose a world from which to make my appearance. With an almost regal nod to each of them, he strode out. Congratulations, Captain, Thrawn said, eyeing Pelion coolly. Your idea seems to have caught Master Sabaoth's fancy. Pelion forced himself to meet that gaze. I apologize, Admiral, if I spoke out of turn. Thrawn smiled faintly. You served too long under Lord Vader, Captain, he said. I have no qualms about accepting a useful idea merely because it wasn't my own. My position and ego are not at stake here. Except perhaps when dealing with Sabaoth. Yes, sir, Pelion said aloud. With your permission, Admiral, I'll go prepare those transmissions to the Wayland and Nogri teams. At your convenience, Captain, and continue to monitor the preparations for the Sluice Van operation. Thrawn's glowing eyes seemed to bore into his. Monitor them closely, Captain. With Mount Tantus and Sluice Van both, the long path to victory over the rebellion will have begun. With, or even without, our Jedi Master. In theory, inter-council meetings were supposed to be a quieter, more casual sort of encounter than the more formal Provisional Council things. In actual practice, Han had long ago found out an inter-council grilling could be just as rough as being raked over the fires by the larger group. Let me get this straight then, Captain Solo, Borsk Failure said with his usual oily politeness. You alone, and without consultation with anyone in official authority, made the decision to cancel the Bimasari mission. I've already said that, Han told him. He felt like suggesting to the Bothan that he pay better attention. I've also stated my reasons for doing so, which in my opinion were good and proper ones, Admiral Akbar's gravelly voice interjected in Han's support. Captain Solo's duty at that point was abundantly clear, to protect the ambassador in his charge and to return safely to Alertus. Alertus to what? Failure countered. Forgive me, Admiral, but I don't understand what exactly this threat is we're supposedly facing. Whoever these gray-skinned beings were, they clearly weren't considered important enough by the old Senate to even be included in the records. I doubt a race that insignificant is likely to be capable of mounting a major offensive against us. We don't know that that's the reason they aren't in the records, Leia put in. It could simply be an oversight or gap damage. Or else a deliberate erasure, Luke said. Failure's fur rippled, indicating polite disbelief. And why would the Imperial Senate want to erase the records of an entire race's existence? I didn't say it was necessarily the Senate's idea, Luke said. Maybe the aliens themselves destroyed their records. Failure sniffed. Far-fetched. Even if it was possible, why would anyone want to do it? Perhaps Councillor Organa Solo can answer that, Mon Mothma interjected calmly, looking at Leia. You were more involved in the information side of the Imperial Senate than I was, Leia. Would such a manipulation have been possible? I really don't know, Leia said, shaking her head. I never got all that deeply into the actual mechanics of how the Senate's records were handled. Common wisdom, though, would suggest that it's impossible to create a security system that can't be broken by someone determined enough to do it. That still doesn't answer the question of why these aliens of yours would be that determined, Failure sniffed. Maybe they saw the Old Republic's coming demise, Leia told him, her voice starting to sound a little irritated. They might have erased all references to themselves and their worlds in hopes the rising empire might not notice them. Failure was fast, all right. Honda had to give him that. In that case, the Bothan smoothly switched gears. Perhaps a fear of rediscovery was all that motivated this attack as well. He looked at Akbar. Regardless, I see no reason to make a full-fledged military operation out of this. To reduce our glorious forces to the level of a mere diplomatic entourage is an insult to their courage and their fighting spirit. You can dispense with the speeches, Counselor, Akbar rumbled. None of our glorious forces are here to be impressed by them. I say only what I feel, Admiral, Failure said, with that air of wounded pride he did so well. Akbar's eyes swiveled towards Failure. I wonder, Leia spoke up quickly, if we could get back to the original subject here. I presume it hasn't escaped anyone's notice that, whatever their motivation, the aliens were ready and waiting for us when we reached Bimasari. We're going to need tighter security for these missions, obviously, Akbar said. At both ends. Your attackers did suborn a local BIM politician, after all. All of which will cost that much more time and effort, Thalia murmured, a section of his fur rippling. It can't be helped, Mon Mothma said firmly. If we don't protect our negotiators, the New Republic will stagnate and wither. Accordingly, she looked at Akbar. You will detail a force to accompany Councillor Organa Solo on her trip back to Bimasari tomorrow. Tomorrow? Han threw a sharp look at Leia, got an equally surprised look in return. Excuse me, he said, raising a finger. Tomorrow? Mon Mothma looked at him, an expression of mild surprise on her face. Yes, tomorrow. The Bims are still waiting, Captain. I know, but what Han is trying to say, Leia jumped in, is that I had intended at this meeting to ask for a brief leave of absence from my diplomatic duties. I'm afraid that's not possible, Mon Mothma said, with a slight frown. There's far too much work to be done here. We're not talking about a vacation here, Han told her, trying to remember his diplomatic manners. Leia needs more time to concentrate on her Jedi training. Mon Mothma pursed her lips, throwing glances at Akbar and Thalia. I'm sorry, she said, shaking her head. I, of all people, recognize the need to add new Jedi to our ranks, but for now there are simply too many urgent demands on our time. She looked at Thalia again. Almost, Han thought sourly, as if seeking his permission. In another year, possibly sooner, she added, glancing at Leia's stomach, we'll have enough experienced diplomats for you to devote the bulk of your time to your studies. But right now, I'm afraid we need you here. For a long, awkward moment, the room was silent. Akbar spoke first. If you'll excuse me, I'll go and have that escort force prepared. Of course, Mon Mothma nodded. Unless there's something more, we stand adjourned. And that was that. Jaw clenched tightly, Han began collecting his data cards together. You all right? Leia asked quietly from beside him. You know, it was a lot easier back when we were just taking on the Empire, he growled. He threw a glare across the table at Thalia. At least then we knew who our enemies were. Leia squeezed his arm. Come on, she said. Let's go see if they've gotten 3PO cleaned up yet. That's the end of the chapter. One of the interesting things I think that this chapter does show is that even in the old EU, there were issues in the early days of the New Republic. You had lack of resources, just as they were trying to show in The Mandalorian, but at least they had a provisional government going. They had factions, they argued, they didn't necessarily agree with each other, but they were trying to make it work. And that shows a level of competence that apparently Disney just doesn't want to show. Um, in their continued disparagement of everything that Lucas created, they appear to just want to tear it down and tell their story because they think it's better. I think these novels show a very good reason why that doesn't work. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. I will talk to you all really soon.